money and about stuff and about heaven and all that stuff. Everything we sang about and living in fear and faith, I think he's going to say some things in just 4 verses that are pretty profound, and hopefully I can do a good job of conveying it. First service, I felt like I got off on a tangent there, and I do that sometimes. But this service, laser focused. That's the plan, right? There's a story that I heard a couple of weeks ago. I like a good story, and I heard it a couple of weeks ago about a guy named Joseph Richardson, and he was a millionaire. He had, when he died, he had $20 million. He was worth $20 million, and he had made a lot of money in railroads and made a lot of money in property and investments and different things. And he had a lot of holdings, but one unique holding that he had in New York City was a strip of land that was 5 feet wide and 104 feet long. Truthfully, to get a picture of it in your head, the aisle here, of our church between the pews, about 5 foot wide. It's a little wider than 5 foot actually, but about 5 foot wide and 104 feet long. And he owned it on the 82nd Street in Lexington, up on the Upper East Side. And this was in the turn of the last century. 1900, like 1880s, I think, when he actually owned the land, and but that was getting more expensive. Land there was getting more high dollar. New York, even then, was an expensive place to live relative to the rest of the country. And the guy who owned the rest of the block, everything but that 5 foot strip there on 82nd and Lexington, asked Richardson if he could buy it. Offered him $1,000 for it, and Richardson said no, but he would take $5,000 for it, which is crazy because it's just a little strip of land, and again, $1,000 then was an enormous amount of money, but he wanted $5,000, and so the other guy said, well, it's crazy, I'm not doing it, and he went ahead and built his apartment building anyway. He built it. I got a picture of the apartment building, I think. There it is. He built the apartment building anyway, and it was 4 stories, and he said, I'll just look over this guy's 5 foot. I won't worry about it. Well, it made him mad. It made the Joseph mad, and so he built a house too on the 5 foot. He built a house that was 4 stories tall, and you can see it here with the red line. This is Joseph's house in the front. This is the apartment building, and this is the 5 foot house on the other side. And he built it 4 stories tall. He didn't want this guy to be able to look across his land to the street. So the neighbors called it the spite house because he just built it because he was mad. He was ticked off, right? So he built this house. It was, again, it's as wide as this aisle. Well, not quite as wide as this aisle here. Every table in the house had to be special order. The dining room table was 18 inches wide, right? They had to order a special stove for it. When he died, there was no funeral homes really then. People would have a wake there in the house, and people came from all over to see how they were going to get the coffin out of this guy's door because it was such a small house, and it became kind of famous. One reporter came to take pictures of the inside of it and got stuck he was a bigger guy and got stuck in one of the stairways. They had to bring in help to get him out of the house. Imagine living in a house as wide as this aisleway, and he lived there for 14 years. Once he built the house until he died. That was his last house. He lived there for 14 years in this house that was 5 foot wide just to get even because it ticked him off that the other guy would look over his property for not paying for it. What it taught me was a lot of interesting things. First of all, again, millionaire, multimillionaire, then probably a billionaire in today's dollars. And he devoted the last 14 years of his life to making the other guy mad. And it's crazy, right? Okay. Well, what it taught me was when I heard the story is that money can do a lot of things, and there's a lot of value to having some money in the bank. There's a lot of value to having a little money at your disposal, for sure. Money gives you options. If you have some money, you can decide at the last minute to take a vacation. If you've got enough money, you can go wherever you want. If you have enough money, you can buy the clothes you want and the car you want and the house you want and maybe buy enough of those things that other people will look at you and be impressed when you wear your clothes or drive your car or walk around in your house. Maybe you can have enough money that people will be afraid of you a little bit when you walk into the room if you get enough money. But money can't buy you common sense. It can't make you sane if you're not sane. It can't make you look less embarrassing if you're all ate up with spite and bitterness and hate. It can't give you peace. You know, money, you can have all the money in the world and still be a miserable human being. And according to the Beatles, it can't buy you love. But I wasn't going to preach on that. Peace is where I wanted to focus. So today, and the sermon I wanted to focus on was Paul, and he's responding to the Philippians who had given him this offering. And that's the first verse we're going to talk about. He says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord. We're just going to look at 4 verses here. Philippians 4:10-13. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, he said, you were concerned about me, but you had no opportunity to show it. So they had given him an offering, and he's bragging on them a little bit. So I really appreciate it. And remember, if you've been with us for this whole series, Paul's in prison. Prison then worked a little different than prison now. All that you got in prison was a room. That's all they guaranteed you in prison. They would feed you if they could. They didn't really... But the rules were different. If your family wanted to bring you stuff, for the most part, you were allowed to do that. So if they wanted to bring you extra food, or if they wanted to bring you extra, like a blanket or whatever, then you could. And so you really depended upon your family to come through in a big, big way, because there weren't that many things given to you when you were in prison. And there's still not, but more today than there was then. And so these guys had taken up this offering for Paul, and he's thankful for it. He's, I'm, really means a lot that you did that. And he wants them to know that it meant a lot. But almost immediately after he says this, he starts to qualify it. He says, well, I'm not saying that. I really appreciate it. I'm not saying that because I'm in need, because I've learned to be content whatever circumstances. I'm not saying that because I'm in need, and I'm going to focus on a couple different phrases in this verse. The in need part, remember, Paul's in jail. So it would seem like if there was ever a time to say I'm in need, it would be then. I'm in jail. That would be the time to say you're in need. But Paul says that's not really a need situation. I mean, yeah, I'm in kind of a tough spot here, but I'm doing okay. And again, it's not like some people will do that on purpose. Like they can't ever ask for help. They have that kind of personality. And that's not what Paul's doing. He's already said in the last verse, I really appreciate it. So it's not that he can't... have you known people like that? I mean, they could be... I'm like that on some things. Danielle, your dad... Danielle's dad's a plumber. My pipe broke on my outside faucet last year, and I dug a hole trying to get it, and I couldn't get it, and it kept leaking, and it should have been the easiest repair in the world, but it wasn't, and I kept having to dig more out, and it just kept leaking, and so my legs are sticking out of the hole, and I'm on my stomach, and I'm in the hole, right? You can't see anything below my waist. I'm all stuck in there, and water is all over the place, and I'm muddy up to my elbows, and Tom sees me as he's driving down the road and walks across the yard. He goes, hey, you need help? And I said, oh, no, I'm doing fine, That's what you do, right? Why do you ask? No, I'm doing great. And so he's not doing that, right? I mean, he's in jail. And in the book of Philippians, he's already talked about that. I'm in jail. He's not hid that. He's not pretended like it's not true. What he's saying here is that in spite of everything that's going on, I don't need anything. I mean, God's taking care of me. Now, again, he's appreciative for it, and he's already thanked him for it. I mean, I'm glad you did it, he said. Thanks a lot. But even if you hadn't done it, I would still be doing what I'm doing. God's taking care of me, and that's his attitude, and that's a good attitude. That's not pride. That's just being, what I do, I don't do for money. What I do because God needs me to do it. God wants me to do it. God's called me to do it. And that's the first thing. But he says, I'm not just saying because I'm in need. He says, I've learned the secret to be content. And this word content's an odd word. There was a philosophy in Paul's day called Stoicism, being a Stoic. And the idea was they would use this word here. It means self-sufficient. I have everything I need in myself to get through the day. When the word is used, it normally means that. But Paul's going to change the meaning a little bit. He's not so much talking about self-sufficiency here, but having sufficiency and strength in Christ. And he's going to make that more clear here in a minute. But whatever, the point is, same idea. Even though I'm in jail, I'm at peace inside. My inside is fine. My outside may be a mess, but my inside is fine. And Paul says, I've learned it. I want to focus on that word too. I'm not saying because I'm in need, but I've learned. And you don't pick this stuff up like in a Bible study. Even in a sermon here, you don't totally pick it up. And I know that. That's one of the hooks about today that makes it kind of hard to speak about. Some of this stuff, you just have to learn it. And the only way you learn it is by holding on tight to him in the middle of something awful. When I'm at camp, sometimes when I'm preaching to high schoolers or talking to younger guys, maybe here helping Gabe out with something, and I'm teaching to younger guys, some of this is kind of hard to convey because it's not something you can just know intellectually. It's the kind of thing you have to feel. And the only way you can feel it is by going through stuff and seeing God come through. Again and again and again and again. And I've seen that my whole life. I've seen God come through in ways that I liked, where I would be sick and I would pray for help and I would get better, or somebody else that I love would be in trouble and I'd pray for them and they would get through it. But I've also seen God come through when it didn't go the way that I liked. Because even in the middle of it, I could have some peace. Even in the middle of it, I could see his hand. Even in the middle of it, I could see what he was doing. And there's just no way to microwave that. So if you've never been through it, there's a certain amount of trust that I'm asking you to have in me, and there's a certain amount of trust that Paul's asking you to have. I mean, some of this stuff you just can't know until you go through it, but I promise, Paul's saying, if you will give God a chance, he will prove faithful. And that's what he's saying here. I've learned how no matter what goes on, that God can be trusted. I've learned to be content no matter the circumstances. He says, Paul does, I know what it's like to be in need. Now remember, he's in jail right now, so what he's talking about is something even worse than that, right? I know what it's like to really be in a hole where you're not sure how you're going to survive the next moment. He said, I know what it's like to have plenty. We don't know for sure that Paul, before he became a Christian, was probably a pretty wealthy man. He probably had a lot of money and a lot of influence. And Paul said, I know what it's like to have those things. I know what it's like to be on both sides of this. But I've also learned the secret of being content in every situation. There was a book a couple of years ago called The Secret, sold 1 billion copies. And it was the idea that, maybe some of you own it, but the idea that if you could just learn this secret, your life would take off. Paul's using that same kind of language here. There is a secret. There's a secret formula that if you will just make this your life's foundation, you can be content. Again, find within yourself the strength, the peace, the power to go on no matter what happens. That's what Paul's promising or getting ready to promise here. There is a secret to life that anybody can have, and you can learn it if you want to. And it's just this. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Now, I'm doing the NIV Bible here. King James is probably a little more famous for this. The King James says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's probably a little more famous version of that verse. But either way, the him here is Christ. The him here is Jesus. I can do all things and all this, all of the stuff I need to do. I can do it all through Christ who strengthens me. That's the secret. That's the bottom line. Rich and poor, the whole conversation here with Paul started because he'd gotten this offering. Money can do a lot of good things for a person, and you should save some if you can. Nothing wrong with that. You should have some investments and try to get ahead in this world. That you should do that. You should absolutely do that. But money in and of itself, Paul says, it just brings temptation. When I don't have enough money to do what I think I want to do or what I know I would like to get into, all I can think about is how I don't have it. Advertisement works that way. It tries to show you a picture of how rich your life could be if only you had whatever. And it's all you can think about. Some of you have actually experienced that. You decided that you wanted a Jeep, and then it seemed like everybody in town was driving a Jeep. Or you wanted a whatever, you wanted somebody else had a beach house or something like that. And wouldn't that be great? And it just seems like, man, all your friends are planning their retirement. They're going to go to Florida. Everybody is going to, and it's weird. It's all you can see, right? If I don't have enough money to do the thing I want, it's all I can think about. My mind has a way of not being content. And if I really am poor, if I really don't have anything, well, I might be tempted to steal or cheat or sneak ahead. I might get bitter at people. Sometimes we talk about giving in church and how important it is to be generous to God. And I've talked to people who are on that end of the spectrum, the poorer end of the spectrum, and they'll say, well, it's just not fair. I mean, how could God expect me to give 10% when I'm having a hard time surviving on what I have? And I get it. There's some unique temptations when you're on that side. On the other side of it, though, there's also unique temptations. If you have a lot of money, you can start to put your trust in that, to assume that because you have a lot of money, you don't have to think about some of the things that everybody else has to think about. But hasn't this coronavirus proven that you can be the richest man in the world and this little germ can get you, right? You can have all the money in the world and you can't guarantee that how your next day is going to go. And this weird thing starts to happen when we have money. And I know I've talked about this before, but it's fascinating to me. It is. You would think that, in theory, the more money I have, the more generous I would be, right? The poor person will say that about the rich person. Well, yeah, you're expecting me to give a percentage of my income. The guy who makes $1 million, he should do that for sure because he's still got $900,000 to live on after he gives his 10% away. But that's not how you think when you have the $1 million. It's not how you think when you get wealthier. All you can think about is how much money you're letting go of. It's a crazy thing. I mean, if you think about it for just a second, and I've mentioned this, and I'm sorry if you've been with me before and heard it. One of my first cars was a Buick Regal that I had to put oil in, a quart of oil in every gas fill up. If anybody's ever had a car like that, but I had to put an extra quart of oil in every time I filled up the tank. I started buying recycled oil because viscosity was not my number one concern, right? It didn't matter just as long as it kind of kept the gears moving. And it smoked all the time, and it was a terrible car, but I loved it. And if somebody, I had the cloth on the header was falling down on my head. You might have a car like that, and I had it all tacked up. And it looked really cool to me, but it was weird looking. And I was proud of this car, even though it was awful. And if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, could I borrow your car? Sure, I'd toss them my keys. I don't think anything at all about it. If they had wrecked it or if they had damaged it in some way, I would have had to walk. I had no extra money, and I had no credit. I couldn't go buy another car. I mean, I would have been in a bind, but I didn't think anything at all about loaning my car out. Well, now, if somebody were to wreck one of my cars, I could go get another one. I'd have to make payments, but I could do it. But I'm tighter-fisted with it. It's the craziest thing in the world. I should be, yeah, whatever. Take my, but I don't think that way. I don't. I get all tight-fisted with it. It's mine. It's mine. You can't take it. We'll get calls sometimes from people in the community who are calling the church needing help, and some old lady will call the church and I can't pay for anything. I can't pay for my gas or my water or my electric. Anything you can do will help out. And so you start asking them questions. Well, who all's there at the house with you? Well, I've got my son and his wife and their kids. Are any of them working? No, none of them are working. They're all here right now. And you're paying for all of them? Yeah, she said. Ma'am, I found your problem. But I couldn't kick them out. And so, we can argue about how smart that is, all right? That's a whole nother discussion, how smart that is, that way of living. But you can't argue the generosity of it. I mean, this poor woman is in such a bad shape that she's having to call strangers to ask for money. But I couldn't think of letting my kids. You know what I'm saying? and a person with a lot more money would never do something like this. My house. When my daughter comes to visit, it's my house. It's mine. It's just weird. And there's just unique temptations with having money that come along, and there's unique temptations with not having it. And Paul says, if you don't watch out, you can get caught either way. And I've learned the secret to not be focused on any of that. I just focus on Christ. And what he's talking about here is I focus on what Jesus has done in the past. Right? That's the cross behind me there, but it's not just the distant past. I mean, at the cross, Jesus paid for your sin. At the cross, Jesus died so that one day you can stand with him. Jesus paid your ticket to heaven. Jesus did all that at the cross. That alone, that one event in the past, if you focus on it, should be enough to get you through anything. But it's not just that. My whole life, God's been faithful. We sing another song sometime, the goodness of God. All my life, you've shown your goodness to me. And so I can think about my past, and I know that God's always been faithful, and it gives me hope and faith that he'll continue to be faithful. It gives me hope in my present. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Just last week we talked about that when you're anxious or worried, you should pray to God, knowing that the peace of God will guard your heart. I have found this to be true. Even when I'm desperate, if I'll just stop for a moment and pray, I feel His Spirit coming on me. This is not just fantasy. Anybody can do this. But it gives me hope for my future. Because Jesus did what He did, because of Him coming back and the resurrection, I have hope He's going to do that for me. I read a article this week, and it was interesting to me because I didn't know if it was true. And I only read one article. I didn't research it deeply, so it's possible that the one article, I read it on the internet, so I'm not, again, okay. But I didn't know it. It was new information to me, and I didn't. But it was a Hindu who had become a Christian who's writing the article, and he talked about how, a lot of Hindus aren't even sure if Krishna, when he was alive, or if he, all the things he did was alive. It's not important in Hinduism if the things he said or all this stuff, if it was real or not. Buddhism's kind of the same thing. We don't know for sure exactly all the different events of his life. We don't. With Christianity, it's different. We know pretty much exactly when Jesus was alive. It can be studied. You can look at other events of the time. You can look at other people who talk about Jesus and His impact. Probably the resurrection, more than any other event in history, has been thought over and reconsidered and reimagined and restudied. I mean, you couldn't find hardly anything like that. There's a lot to prove that it's true. It's not just something that people say. There's a lot of history to back it up. And if Jesus really did come out of the grave, then I know that one day He's going to carry me too. And so it changes how I look at things. I mean, I still wear a mask. I still put my seatbelt on. I still lock the door of my house when I leave. But no matter what happens to those things or what happens to me, I know He's got me. I can do all things through Him who gives me strength. When you talk about living your life, some people live their life completely for the present. As a philosophy, this is known as existentialism, and it's seize the day, carpe diem, passion in life, do it all right now. You don't think about the future. You don't save any money for that. You're just living for today. You're not beholden to anything before. You're just focusing on right now. And some people live their lives like that. Every day needs to be exciting and a party and high energy because today is the day. Some people live their lives strictly for the past. They're traditionalists, would be the philosophy there. Fiddler on the Roof, tradition. And the whole idea, they think about their family and their upbringing and their reputation, and everything they do is about the community and where they came from. And if the Fiddler on the Roof movie is actually a good study in this philosophy, because if you remember that play, the main character is not sure that he even knows where God's at anymore. He doesn't feel it really anymore. He wonders if love is enough, and he has a whole bunch of things, but he's got his tradition, and he can base his life on it. A lot of churches do that. We've never done it that way before. We do it this way, and everything's about tradition. Some people live their life completely for the future. I had a neighbor once who would not spend a nickel on anything. Everything went to the bank. One day I'm going to want that, and it'll be there in the bank. And he just lived so completely humble, and his wife was, kind of miserable about it, and he just kept banking everything and banking everything and banking everything and banking everything, because one day I'm going to want that. And life just kept waiting for one day. Socialism works on that principle at some level, that you're going to have a big hit now, but one day everybody will be equal. The employer and the employee will all be lying down like the lion and the lamb together, and it'll all be wonderful one day. So don't think about the sacrifice you're making now, because one day it'll be worth it when we're all equal. And that's a futuristic, utopian kind of thing. Jesus is bigger than all three of those views. And He ties all of them together. On the night that He was betrayed, it said He took bread and wine, and He said, "This is my body, this is my blood." And He says, "As often as you take it," which is today, "I want you to remember what I did, the past, until I come again in the future." He's got it all. in his hands. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and it's all in his hands. And because it's all in his hands, I can have confidence. If my past is a problem, some of you, your past is a problem. You do all you can to hide your past. It's not a problem for him. He paid for it. For some of you, it's about this moment. You're just ate up with fear and anxiety and worry, or maybe you're trapped in kind of a bad situation and it just weighs on you all the stinking time. But he's got you. He's got you in the present. He's got you in the present, and you can turn to him and you can ask him to move. You can devote yourself to what he wants you to do, and you're going to find strength there. And if I can be completely transparent with you here, you're going to find strength pretty quickly there. I mean, it's not like you got to invest for 10 years before you start getting return on this investment. You're going to see some difference there immediately. It just requires some faith. Or maybe it's the future you're worried about. You don't have enough money saved. You can't retire until you're 95. I'm going to be working until I'm dead. I've got one of my friends who says he wants to take the maximum loan out from the bank on the day he dies. He feels like he's cheated the system then. He's gotten more out of it then. But somebody's still got to pay all that back. And maybe you're worried about that. How am I ever going to get paid back? Maybe you're worried about the future with your kids or with your marriage or with your health. God's got you. He sees the future already. And no matter what happens in this life, sooner or later you have to hand everything back. And when you do, he'll be there on the other side to take you in. Jesus, remember, said to one person, I'm the resurrection, I'm the life. If a person believes in me, they won't die. Now, taken literally, you might say, well, Jesus lied about that. People have died all the time who believed in Jesus. But I think you got to look at what he's really saying there. I think he's talking about your experience. And I think on your experience, you will close your eyes in this life and you'll open them there. Now, if you've not tied yourself to Jesus, if you've not relied on him to be your strength, if you've not given him your heart, well, then I understand all the worry. I do. Because if you've not given him your heart, then your past one day is going to be a problem. Somebody's going to parse through all this stuff one day, and you're going to be found wanting. If you're not trusting Jesus, then I can understand why your present is a problem. If it's all up to you, haven't you proven in your life that you just don't have whatever it takes to do it right all the time? And I would worry about my future. Sometimes I get asked to do a funeral for people who had nothing to do with God. And it's hard to know what to say because I don't know what hope a person has if they don't tie themselves to him. If you're going to try to face God one day and just stand there on your own merit, I don't know what hope a person has there. Some people want to ignore all that, just pretend like it's not real, maybe run fast enough or play hard enough or be busy enough that you never think about all those things, but they're still there. They're still there. I don't want to get way off track here. This happened to me first service on a different thing, so I'm just going to try to just dart gently over here, and we'll come right back. Okay, we're not going to be here very long, just for a moment, and we're going to come right back over to here. Okay? I worry about people on this. When the anxiety and the depression, when I had a little spout with that some time ago, and everything I thought was going pretty good. I was as busy as I could be. The church was growing. Everything was clicking along left and right. And my kids are getting bigger. And Julia and I were doing fine. And then just one day I didn't want to get out of bed. And I never had that before. That had never happened to me before. And I just didn't want to do anything. I just couldn't get my mind to focus on anything right. And as I kind of got into it, what I realized is that for months and months and months, I just kept myself busy so I didn't have to focus on these other things. People do that all the time, right? They do that all the time, but all those other things are still there, and then something happens, right? Something happens, and all of a sudden the curtain's pulled away, and you got to deal with this. And maybe it's your kid maybe goes off the deep end on something, and you thought everything was perfect, and now it's not. Or maybe husband and wife, and you get into this argument, and you're thinking, "Where's this coming from?" Well, it's been coming for a long time. Or maybe it's your work or your health or something else, and you thought you had your whole life under control, and then something happens, and you don't have anything under control, and because you realize in that moment that you're just one person, and it's in that moment that this verse starts to matter. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it has to be learned. I had a friend in California who one day when she was checking herself, she found a lump. And her family had a big history with cancer. And it scared her. And she didn't want to have cancer. So she didn't tell anybody. And it got worse. It finally got to be something that you could see on the outside even. Like an open, ugly place there kind of. But she didn't want to have cancer. So she didn't tell anybody. And it finally got bad enough that she couldn't hide the pain of it. And her family they didn't know, and they made her go see a doctor, and nothing the doctor can do now. You know, she'd had about 2 years there where she didn't want to have cancer, so she didn't do anything. But that doesn't change anything, right? You're not going to let your head think on these things, but it doesn't change anything. It is what it is. Life is still going on, and just because you don't open your eyes and think about it doesn't mean it's not going on. And to all of that, when you finally see it for the first time, where you stand and where you're going and where you've been, in that moment you're going to realize you need a hand from God. And you need more than a hand. You need a Savior. And in that moment, Jesus can step in and be that for you. And we'll come back to the invitation. If any of you wonder or doubt where you're at on this thing with God, I want to challenge you today to call out to Him. We aren't able to do an invitation because of the virus, and we're scared to be all huddled up here together and nervous about that. But if anybody needs to talk about anything on that topic today, come find me or come find somebody in your family. Man, talk about this stuff. Don't just keep pretending like it's not there, because it is there. And these little nudges that God gives you, those are precious things. They're intended to wake you up, to help you go to where God wants you to go. And if you're feeling any of that today, like, man, I need to get myself straightened up, I'm not living like this at all, then today's the day. Today's the day to make that decision, to say, okay, God, I choose to give it to you, to trust that you're going to give me the strength I need to get through. Let me pray for you. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this group, and I pray, Father, for them.